So if I could go back and change things on my journey to early retirement, I would have maxed out all of my retirement accounts. I retired a lot younger, but having so much money in a taxable account really impacts me. Those qualified dividends, I pay income on every single year. Whereas if I had less in that and more in Roth that I would maybe eventually take out, even if I took it out early, I would be in better shape. So good morning and welcome. My name is Stephanie, and today we're going to talk about dating an early retiree and all those burning questions that you might have. So as a disclaimer, this is entertainment purposes. I don't give any specific tax advice, legal advice, or relationship advice. And while I am single for tax purposes, I am in a committed relationship. But what better way to describe myself and to introduce myself than to go with my fire dating website profile. So my name is Stephanie. I'm originally from West Palm Beach area in Florida. I'm now a full-time nomad. I'm 34 and I've been retired for about 2.5 years. I have no dependents, no children. I'm an industrial engineer by education. In the past, I was a quality engineer and I lived abroad for 4 years, which is how I was able to save so much money at a younger age. Most of my assets are held in stocks. I have no experience with real estate at all. So we're limited on time today, so we're going to have to do a quick speed date. But let's dive into those questions that you may have. How do you ensure your health? Because we want to make sure we're having a healthy relationship. So in early retirement, there are generally 5 ways of having health coverage. So the first is COBRA. This is an extension of your employer's insurance that you can get for the first 18 to 36 months after you retire. If you've already used some of your deductible, then you'd be able to continue to use that deductible, potentially wanting to finish out your term with your employer. Health sharing ministries is commonly brought up, but it is not a true insurance, and there are moral-based judgments. So example, I'm a unwed female, which means that if I got pregnant, it wouldn't cover me. It is cheaper than ACA, but you kind of have to outweigh that. I did for my first year an off-marketplace insurance. It was difficult to find. On my ID card, there were 5 different logos. So when I tried to go get free COVID tests, I couldn't figure out what company I actually needed to put in for my insurance. It was cheaper. I didn't have to worry about my subsidies. So I was able to do more Roth conversions that year. But, I would still just recommend if you're going to look at those going just towards ACA healthcare. So in your home state for ACA, you get your routine care. If you are traveling around the US, you would have out-of-state emergency care, but you don't have coverage internationally. With ACA, you can look at HSAs and getting subsidies. So we'll explore a little bit more about ACA in the next slide. This year, I'm staying out of the US for more of the year, but there's limited times if you go with a worldwide healthcare coverage like Cigna. So we have up to 6 months that we can be in the US, but it depends on what premiums you pay. Some of them you'll have no time in the US. This will allow us to do more Roth conversions this year, and it covers us worldwide as opposed to just in our home state. So ACA healthcare, you're going to want to take down this link, healthcare.gov/c-plans. This is where you can actually go without putting in your name or email address and actually understand what are the plans that are available to you. So for example, I think there are 90 plans that are available to me when I input my information, including my zip code, age, and such. So for me this year, my cheapest plan on ACA would be $364. And with that, I can have an income level of $36,500 to get full subsidies. Now, if I look at an HSA plan, then the cheapest plan for me would be $477 a month, $477. Yeah. And that though would only allow me to have $23,500 as my subsidy amount, or to match that subsidy amount for income levels. So that's impactful if you're looking at doing Roth conversions. Subsidies are just monthly tax credits. So for example, if you don't get your income tax correct, or how much you're going to do income correct, then you would just have that corrected on your tax returns, and you'd either get a tax refund or have to pay more taxes at tax time if you did get that incorrect. I realized on the previous slide. So one thing to note on HSA contribution or doing an HSA plan is, so for me this year, $13,000 is the difference of income level. Since you can only contribute $4,000 and change to an HSA, it wouldn't make sense for me to do an HSA plan because I couldn't do more Roth conversions. If that was within $4,000, I might consider doing an HSA because then I can put more money into tax deferred accounts. So just something to keep in mind. And it was really easy to go through with C plans. You'll put in all your information. You'll figure out what plan you want, and then you can go back and play with that income levels to see how you would get those full subsidies. So after I retired, I had some big decisions to make about reorganizing my portfolio. So my main taxable account was with Betterment, and it wouldn't allow me to turn off automatic dividend reinvesting, which I wanted those dividends to be able to live off of. So I decided to do an in-kind transfer to either Fidelity or Vanguard account. The HSA at my previous employer had a $5 monthly fee, so I moved that over to Fidelity, and I specifically say Fidelity on this one because Vanguard, Schwab, they go through a third party, so then it's actually not staying with them. I had two employers for employer 401ks. The first one on the list, but the second one I had only worked for a year, so I had a lot lower amount in that. So I rolled that over and used that for my first year of Roth conversions. So you can move it over Fidelity, Vanguard, and then you do the IRA. When you do Roth conversions, you would then move it over to the Roth IRA. My first employer I was with for a lot longer, so it has a higher balance. I liked the investments that I was with. It has low fees, and I didn't want to move it all over because if in the future I decide to do backdoor Roth contributions, then I would potentially not be able to do that or not get as much tax deferment. So I have split these then, and I'm moving over 1 to 2 years at a time over to my IRA, and then I'll do those for Roth conversions. Breaking up with Betterment. Something to note when I moved over all those in-kind transfers, I had 21 different funds with some of them at higher expense ratios. So I moved my money over to Fidelity. I sold off all the bond funds, which are the ones that are in blue, which all had negative or capital losses at the time. And so with that, then I decided to offset that with capital gains. And I looked at getting rid of the capital gains that had the highest expense ratio and potentially this one here where I only had $26 since I wanted to reduce the number of funds I had and get them into more total stock market. I decided then to also get rid of that one just to try to simplify things while things were easier. So I went from 21 funds with higher expense ratios down to my 8 funds that have 0.07% as my expense ratios. The reason why I haven't moved all of that over is that I have about $125,000 in capital gains, and then that would count as income this year. So I want to be conscious as I'm doing that to not allow me to have ACA subsidies or put me in higher tax brackets. So replenishing your cash commonly comes up. So right now my cash is in just higher interest bearing accounts. So money market accounts, individual bonds, treasury bills, all of those are options for it, or like a high yield savings account. I try to keep about 2 to 3 years of expenses in cash. And then I'm using those dividends that aren't being reinvested to replenish. So I don't have to pull money out of the market as often. But I will be conscious when I do start having to pull money out of the market with how much I have in capital gains on those, because those do then count as income. So taxes. This is going to be obviously different for everyone on how you calculate your fixed income. So if you had about $8,000 in qualified dividends in a taxable account, you'd have an account value in total stock market of about $550,000. If that was in like VT Sachs and FC Rocks. Interest and savings usually just earn so little that it's going to be negligible in this example. Interest, if you had about $36,000 at 5%, you would end up with interest of about $1,800. I have a little bit of a side hustle that earns me about $200. So I'm just including it in to give you guys some examples. But this is something that I do every year before the end of the year because I want to be able to do Roth conversions or capital gains, and you have to do them in the calendar year that you're doing taxes on them. So as I described on my ACA page, my optimal tax level for full ACA subsidies would be $36,500. from the previous slide where I talked about my fixed income, that would be $10,000. So on ACA, I would be able to do $26,500 to get full subsidies. If I had an HSA plan, I'd be able to invest $4,150 into that. And then I'd also be able to do that in Roth conversion. So that's the benefit of that ACA plan. If you didn't have an ACA plan or wasn't worried about the subsidy amounts, then you'd start looking at your income tax rates. So I added my single filer plus my standard deduction. And so to fill up the 12% tax bracket, I'd be at $61,750 minus my fixed income would bring me to the ability to do a Roth conversion of $51,750. One thing to note about doing estimated taxes is you shouldn't pay them out of your retirement accounts. If you do, then you'll pay the early withdrawal penalty. So I accidentally did this once when doing a conversion. So that money would then have another 10% penalty if you were younger. So good to note. And also you want to keep things in taxable or in the retirement accounts. So if you didn't have enough in Roth conversions or you were looking at possibly different tax strategies, you could look at long-term capital gains. They get taxed at a different rate than your ordinary income. So if you look on the bottom one, it says your qualified dividends and long-term capital gains. And there's actually a 0% bracket that goes to just below what the limit for the 12% would be. And you get taxed first on your ordinary income, and then the taxes for your long-term gains and qualified dividends get stacked on top of that. But if I wanted to get rid of more of those funds, I might be, instead of doing Roth conversions, doing long-term capital gains. But it just depends on, you're really trying to optimize your lifetime tax strategy. So for a lot of people, if you had too much money in Roth conversions that you needed to do, you would be looking at that first. But say you were also on a sabbatical and you're younger and you don't have as much in your taxable accounts, you could just be raising your capital gains. And then if you're raising them only to this level of the $61,625, then you would be able to just get the cost basis of those accounts up without actually paying taxes because it's in the 0% tax bracket. So if I could go back and change things on my journey to early retirement, I would have maxed out all of my retirement accounts. I retired a lot younger. But having so much money in a taxable account really impacts me. Those qualified dividends, I pay income on every single year. Whereas if I had less in that and more in Roth that I would maybe eventually take out, even if I took it out early, I would be in better shape financially because I wouldn't be having that income every single year that I had to deal with. I would have started instead of with Betterment, I would have started with either Vanguard or Fidelity. And instead of that first year of going with off-marketplace insurance, I would have gone with ACA Healthcare. And it is so easy to go and look at that website that I gave you. So if you're looking at what are my plans going to be and options and you already have an idea, you could even just put in you're 10 years older and see what the options for you would be at that point as well. How do I calculate the amount that I need to retire early? I'm a little bit different, but a lot of you guys potentially already know how much you spend. As I had mentioned, I was an expat for most of my career. And so during that time, I wasn't paying most of my expenses. My only monthly expense was a 99-cent iCloud account. And so that's really hard to decide how much you need when you retire. Then I moved back to the US for a year and had an apartment during COVID. I wasn't traveling. Traveling is a huge part of my life. So that also wasn't a great way to tell how much I was going to need. So now I'm a nomad, which means I also have no idea, and my spending is very variable as well. So I kind of use the gut check method. So if you have $1 million, then you have $40,000. Since you generally know how much you can or will spend, mine actually is more tied to how much I spend when I'm on vacation than what it would be for any of my fixed incomes with utilities or whatnot. So you can kind of look at that. If it's $40,000, then it's $100 a day. Do I think I could live up $100 a day when traveling? So that's kind of my method, which I know is very non-precise, but some of us just don't have those numbers to actually really be able to track. So during early retirement, I encourage people to experiment. These are all the different things that I've done since I've retired. So I have my Reset Early blog. I started a book club. I didn't enjoy running a book club, but I at least know that now. I have a 5 Friends Connect Facebook group because I like to meet up with locals and travelers as we're visiting places. I have a website for my favorite city in the world. We do some pet sitting and house sitting to offset expenses. I do a little bit of mystery shopping. And who knows, in the future, I might decide to do a FI group travel. The wheels are turning, but I haven't made any decisions yet. If you're someone who feels like you're just not going to have things to do when you actually retire, my rule was do one thing a day. So when I'm visiting my parents, there's a great place that does yoga on the water. And that would be the one thing that I do a day. So it's not that it's so difficult to go from working all the time to absolutely nothing that even if you just set up one thing and this is my plan for the day, at least you're doing something and you're starting that momentum and figuring out what else you might want to do. So would you like to connect with me? On Facebook, I'm Stephanie Ann, or my blog, Reset Early, or come join my 5 Friends Connect group and maybe we'll see you around the world. And I will open it up for questions.